Hi folks. So a couple of people have had questions on how to actually wire up the bypass switch that I made for when my quad runs a little warm, especially out on high altitude mountains, just flogging it in low, going up some steep grades. Anyway, sorry for the delay, been really busy with work and training and whatnot, but I made up a diagram for you guys. Definitely not an artist, but Microsoft Paint helps out pretty good. So what we essentially are doing is installing a small switch located on the pod, as you guys seen in the other video. Mounted it right here. Really easy to use. Comes with a LED. I currently don't have it on, but I'll turn it on later on. They come in many different colors. I picked mine up from O'Reilly's Auto Parts. It's about $9 for the switch. This is pretty much what the blades look like. This little centerpiece right here goes right through the plastic. It's got like a little plastic nut that secures it pretty good onto the plastic of the pod housing. What we're looking at is basically handlebars. You got the switch there. It has a ground and then two powers. One of them will be coming from the accessory line, which you'll locate pretty much. I think Polaris uses orange and white for all their accessory powers. Usually you have like two of them underneath your pod. But basically you're just splicing into that. You're not taking the connector off, that way you can use it for other things. But you'll provide power to the switch. Once the switch is actually flipped on, it will use the actual ground to illuminate the LED to let you know that it's actually working. And then it will send the power to whatever source that you're needing it to go to. Alright. Right here, I tied mine into the winch connector. Pretty much it was just because it was the closest thing, and I didn't really want to mess with the actual wiring to the digital display. Things can be pretty finicky, and we're trying to minimize issues while you're out there on the trail. Following it over, this is the fan for the 850, at least the 2011 model. The coloring scheme is black for the ground and blue for the power coming in. I elected to splice mine in after the connector, so I'll show you that here in a few minutes. But essentially my thinking is, if the connector gets water or something and it gets damaged, I can still bypass that and still get power to the fan in order to make it back to the truck safely. The connectors I use are pretty easy to disassemble, so shouldn't have a problem taking it off. If you're stripping the bike down like I do every, I'd say about a year or two, I take it apart, clean it up real good, and what have you. But yeah, if you need to take it apart, it's pretty easy. So you'll need 3 splices. I'll show you each one of those in detail. And then a couple of zip ties here or there. And then some blade connectors. So these are the ones I used. They grip on there pretty firmly. You just crimp them down onto whatever wire you're using. And then for the splices, you can pick up a whole handful of these things from O'Reilly's or from Walmart, but they're pretty nice. You basically stick whichever wire you're going to be using as your power source, going all the way through it so that you're not damaging a connector. You know, notice on this other side here, it's capped off. That way the power that you're now taking off of it just sits up flush against that. And then use a pair of pliers, smash that sucker down real good, and then you flip over the little cap here, locks it on there nice and secure. You can use electrical tape and stuff like that on there, or put a little bit of dielectric grease on there to keep water out if you need to. But again, really easy to take apart. Just get a small screwdriver or needle nose pliers. You just pull that up. It doesn't really do too much damage. Obviously, it's going to cut through the plastic jacket on your wires, but you can easily band-aid that up with some electrical tape if you need to once you disassembled it. So go ahead and walk you through it a little bit here. Obviously battery, but underneath the pod, this is what it's going to look like on the back side. Again, you got your 2 power in, you got your ground up here. Both of them, or sorry, all 3 of them actually come down. I got some duct tape down here. Let's see if you can see that. There we go. Some duct tape, just to prevent any chafing while it's down here by the handlebars and to kind of keep them all together. Going over here to your left handlebar. Basically, I tied in to my winch line, which comes all the way up here, goes through this little bundle of wires, and then here's the switch up here. Now the connector for it is this guy right here. It's green and black on mine, and what I did is I just spliced it in up there at the top of it. Real good. Again, you can use electrical tape, dielectric grease, whatever you feel comfortable with, especially if you're going to be down in the mud and stuff. Speaking of mud, this mod does not actually turn the fan off. This is meant to turn the fan on when the computer system is not turning it on. If you need a mod in order to disable your fan, you're going to have to search for a different video, because this is not going to do that for you. You could probably tweak it in order to make it do that, but that is not what I want to do. So again, this is just to bypass when the computer is no longer telling the fan to turn on. Particularly for whatever reason, Polaris on the 850s decided that in order for the fan to run, the engine must be running, computer-wise, and that doesn't really do you any good when it's overheating on the side of the mountain, because you've been burning it up pretty good. Now, it's not going to completely shut down on you unless it gets too hot. It does go into a limp mode, and that's what I found. Nothing like crawling up a steep grade at a couple of miles an hour, because the engine is basically inducing its own misfires there. So again, here's the winch connector. Just spliced the wire in right there for the ground. That's only to get the LED. If you don't need an LED, then you're probably just going to be stuck with two powers, and that's it. Right here are the two lines that are coming down. You see right down in this area that there's a orange and white wire that's going to be for the accessory. This is one of them, at least on my bike. It came with two, but still intact. You can still use the connector if you need to. You're just splicing it into that area. Zip tied it to a couple of other wires just for stability. Make sure it doesn't jar loose or anything like that. But inside of that splice, this guy right here, there's a bunch of little teeth to it, so it kind of gets down in there and wedges on there pretty good, especially if you use the right ones for the gauge wire that you're using. All right, so that one's going to provide power. So anytime that the key switch is on or in accessory mode, it will turn this orange wire live. So that's really good for when, again, you're sitting on the side of the trail, you know, for a quick drink or whatnot. You can just sit there, turn the fan on, have it cool down the system there, so that the engine does not actually have to be running anymore. All right, following the other red wire, you'll see that it comes over here. Again, just zip tying it to a couple of bundles of wire for stability, so nothing gets ripped out or chewed up or anything like that. If you want, you can always take it apart, put it in the wire loom. I did this mod after I had put the bike back together, so next time I take it apart, which will probably be after this coming winter, then I'll probably stick that back through the wiring loom just to tidy it up a little bit. But for right now, this thing's probably got, shit, I haven't been riding that much, but probably about 200 miles on the setup. There's no sign of chafing or anything like that. Pretty much everything rides nice and flush against the covers themselves. So should be pretty okay, depending on where you're riding. But anyway, yep, you zip tie it down here, and then coming in through the wheel well here, you'll see that it drops down, and here's the connector for the fan. So up in here, usually they have like a plastic or somewhat rubber-like substance that's protecting it from the elements and whatnot. But my thought is, if anything were to happen to it, I can sit there and bypass it, which I think is a good feature. Not exactly the easiest for removing, especially if you're going to take the bike apart. But again, you just basically waste that splice by pulling it back out with some needle noses, or a screwdriver, of that matter. Basically a flathead, you just wedge it in between the little plastic bits where it's met up, and you just wedge it open and then pull it apart. Doesn't really do much damage to any of your wires. And again, if you need to permanently remove it, you just put some electrical tape or something like that on there. So pretty decent. But anyway, so yeah, it's basically it's met up with the blue wire. What that'll do is when the computer's controlling it, the blue wire will be receiving power for the fan. If I'm overriding it, the red wire will be providing the power to the blue wire here, and will then induce current for the fan. Now, if the fan's already running and you turn the switch on, is that going to mess with anything? No, because they are not running in series, they're running in parallel. So you don't have a worry about it creating overvoltage or anything like that. It's basically just going to split that load between the two of them. Basically, you're using two different fuses in your fuse block. But aside from that, really haven't had any issues with it. Unfortunately, haven't actually had a chance to go out and test it because I haven't been back up to the mountains in quite a while. Ride a little bit in the high desert a little bit with the dog, but he's not much for going up to a 10,000 foot mountain peak. So haven't been back up there lately to actually test and make sure that it actually works in theory. But it does provide pretty quick cooldowns for loading up the quad into the back of the truck. Basically, by the time I get it up the ramps, put it into the bed, shut it down, leave the fan on. By the time I go to get the straps on it, it's pretty much nice and cool. It's got not too much heat coming out of it. But yeah, aside from that, that's the setup in a nutshell. Really simple to do. I think it took me only about I would say 30 minutes by the time I found the drill bits to actually go through the plastic, because I wanted to get a good tight fit on there for that little plastic nut that they have that screws onto the back of it. Again, they do come in many different colors. I believe there's red, green, blue, maybe some yellow and orange or something like that. But they're fairly cheap. You can waterproof it if you need to, or you can find a different switch that fits your style. I like this one just because it really fit like right in between that area. Still got room for other switches over here if I need them. But just turning it on, lights up. As you can hear, the fan kicks on. And that's it. It's pretty simple. I'll try to get a good view of this diagram for you guys here. Not exactly the best handiwork at Microsoft Paint, but I think it gets the job done. 3 splices, don't take off any of the connectors, and that's about it. Make sure you zip tie things up. Look for areas where you could get some chafing on the wires. That's one thing you don't want to have, is a wire that starts grounding out in the middle of a ride. Could be a bad time for everybody. But other than that, yep. Look me up, AMD Forever, on PolarisATVforums.com. Used to be on there pretty regularly. Again, last couple of months I've been really swamped with work and stuff, so I haven't been on there too much. But if you're new to the scene, there's a lot of good information on there for your Polaris. It doesn't really matter which model. I think these things go all the way back to like the 70s and 80s. And there's a wealth of people on there with knowledge from old and new. But other than that, have a good one. See ya.